God has blessed us with the beginning of a new year. We all know that today is New Year's Day, 2023 AD. And we would ask, what can we do in 2023 to help make it a good year? We want to have a good year as families, as individuals, as a church. What can we do? And I know you have already given a lot of thought to that. Jack prayed about that this morning. And as you see from this, there can be a long list, a lengthy list of things that we could think of in our own lives and the lives of our family that we could do to make it a good year. And from that long list, I have selected one that is good for all of us, individually and collectively. And that is, of course, as we have just sung, and I appreciate Tim leading that song, counting our blessings. Counting our blessings has such an impact when we actually do it on our lives that it has such a broad application. It covers a lot of ground. The counting of blessings involves identifying them. What exactly are they? It involves keeping track. It involves taking account, actually identifying them as we sing repeatedly in that song, one by one. So singing that song, I appreciate this morning because it really helps. The thoughts of that song are a tremendous help in doing this. Have you ever noticed, I hope we all have, as we have sung that song this morning, what we are actually saying in that song? What I'm going to do in the next few minutes is to read some excerpts. I have some excerpts from this song on the screen. And we're going to draw lessons, biblical lessons from these statements that we have just sung together. It's a unifying thing to sing together, to study together, and apply the Word of God together. We will have several things. I believe each and every one of them will help you have a good 2023. As we reflect back, as we look ahead, we should always be counting our blessings. One of the statements in this song is, count your blessings, see what God hath done. It's kind of a human tendency to think, look what I have done. Look at everything I've got and all the things that I enjoy. Look what we have done, perhaps. But let me suggest, and some statements very closely coincide, Rick, with class discussion this morning on stewardship. If we have blessings in our life, they're given by God. And when you start counting them, you're not counting things that you have accomplished. You are counting things that God has done. You wouldn't have them if God had not done that. Whether you acknowledge that or not, or whether you actually think that and praise God and thank God for that, it's still true. You would have no blessings. None, without God giving them to you. And so it behooves us to think about our stewardship of them, to take an account of them. There are several passages in the book of Psalms as we look at what this lesson is. It helps us see what God has done. In Psalm 67, verses 6 and 7, these two verses together, the earth has yielded its produce. God, our God, blesses us, that all the ends of the earth may fear him. And then in Psalm 67, verses 1 and 2, God be gracious to us and bless us, and cause his face to shine upon us, that thy way may be known on the earth, thy salvation among all the nations. We think about God blessing us in that psalm, David was reflecting upon that fact as God's face shining upon us. And that's an interesting analogy, an encouraging way to think about what God had done and his face shining in your life. Very closely related, but with an additional thought that we want to observe, is count your many blessings. Name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord had done. That's from the first verse. But what is in that we want to take notice of is the song brings to our attention an element that we call sometimes the element of surprise. Counting your blessings has an element of surprise. What? Surprise. Surprise, yes. And that's generally true of most of us. Because don't we underestimate things? I didn't realize there were so many. And so really the surprise is not that we are blessed, but we are blessed with such an abundance. Now sometimes it may not seem like that. When our budgets get tight, things get difficult, we may think and wonder whether we're blessed at all. We may question God. But the answer to that, the antidote to that, let's just pause for a minute. Let's just take a little bit of time out here from our stressful life and the things that so concern and distract us. And let's take stock of our blessings. And it will generally result in surprise. I didn't realize. I hadn't really thought about all of this like this together in so many different ways. And so counting our blessings involves a surprise with such an abundance. And it doesn't matter how little they may seem to us at times, there's still an abundance. In Psalm 40, verse 5, I should say, David said, "Many, O Lord, my God, are the wonders which thou hast done, and thy thoughts toward me. There is none to compare with thee. If I would declare and speak of them, they would be too numerous to count." Even David acknowledged that. You may think, well, wait a minute here. The song is encouraging me to count. The Bible is teaching us they're too numerous to count. So which is true? Well, obviously both are true. And there is harmony in those statements. And obviously we are to take an account of them. Does God expect us to have an actual mathematical number? No. Because we will never be able to count them all. That's the outcome of Psalm 40, verse 5. And David acknowledged that God blesses him. "O Lord my God, are the wonders which thou hast done, and thy thoughts toward us. There is none to compare with thee." And if I would think about them, if I would speak of them, there are really, actually, literally too many to count. So yes, we can count them, but we will never be able to count them all. Have you ever tried? We're going to name some here in a few minutes. Each one of them has an indefinite number. Difficult to arrive in. Your number would be different than my number because you're blessed in different ways than I am. But many of them, of course, would be similar and likened to each other. But David's statement in that verse is very, very helpful in us. And so when we look at naming them one by one, let's consider and not forget that we have more than one kind of blessing. And this is where our focus generally is, on our physical blessings. The amount of stuff we got, the amount of money that we have, the amount of money that we earn, the amount of money, and so forth. And this is not to minimize our physical blessings, because God blesses us with physical blessings. He blesses us with family. And how can we count the numerous blessings that are found in family relationships? in our job providing a check, an income, that we provide money to pay those bills, to make our way through life and to support our own with our good stewardship. The home, the house in which we live that we have made into a home. That, well, sometimes it seems kind of small, or sometimes it may seem too big, too much to do here. And whatever it may be in our case, your home is a blessing. It takes a lot of money to pay those bills. It takes money to upkeep, to maintain, do all those things to keep it up. Yes, but God is blessing you with that home. And even we take for granted our vehicle, or most anymore have vehicles, a plurality, because sometimes in our life, individuals have different lifestyles, responsibilities, and going different places at the same time, so we have a plurality of vehicles to accommodate the needs of a family. That's a blessing to be able to do that. You could get into some detail, and most of you have experienced that when that insurance bill comes for that plurality of vehicles anymore. It's not easy, but the point is, it's a blessing to have transportation, to get from here to there, and for our family members to do the same as they have need. But also, let's not forget good health. You say, well, my health hasn't been all that good. Well, it is good. You may have had some sickness and maybe even some form of disease. A lot of us have experienced those kind of things. And so we can be thankful for the good health. We can also be thankful for the recovery health, the fact that we've had something very serious, something that could have taken us, but we have recovered. We have been treated. And one thing that you and I are becoming more and more aware of, and I'm sure you give thought to this, is how advanced medical procedures are in this world today. And we need to be thankful for the science, for the research, for the application of the procedures that are there available. And some of you work in that field and studying in that field of how, what a blessing that is to have those things and to be able to learn those things and be able to use them to the benefit of others. Too numerous to count. We'll stop there and talk about the other kind of blessing. The other kind of blessing, sometimes we forget, we neglect to even think about spiritual blessings. Those things are, yes, they're blessings, and we should even regard them as the most important, the most valuable, the most precious. And they would include, with that Bible you have in your hand, so many bad things are being said about the Bible in our age. So many people are discarding it, bad-mouthing it, that sometimes it causes even Christians to lose their regard for the Bible. It can lay dormant on the coffee table. It can lay dormant in the shelf, on the shelf in the bookcase. But let me tell you, we should never underestimate the value of that blessing that God has given us in that library of books that are inspired by the very breath of God that we call the Bible. But to be able to talk to God and have God hear you and have such interest in you and has promised that he will take care of you, that he will answer your prayers, what a blessing that is. But then to be able to call upon him and transgress his word, violate the very God of heaven and have forgiveness, where that sin is no longer held against us. We no longer have that guilt. Something that we should each treasure every day is our companionship with the Lord. On this chart, I'm simply calling it the Lord's indwelling, and that's what it is. He's not indwelling us literally. It's not an incarnation of deity in this human body. It was for him when he came to the earth, but for us, it's a spiritual, intimate fellowship that is controlling us. He walks with us. He talks with us. And He is with us. He is our companion. And let me tell you, the more that you come to know that, the more that you come to depend upon that, the more of a blessing that is to you. But in a world of chaos, in a world of conflict, in a world of trouble, in a world of war, to be able to have in your bosom the peace of God that passeth all understanding is truly a blessing that we need to count. But then to be able to look forward, to anticipate with desire and expectation, both elements present, is a blessing. If we did not have hope, and we experience this every day in a lot of different ways. You know, we look forward to things. We plan. We anticipate. We have hope of physical, secular things. And that hope helps us look forward to something. It gets us through some difficult times by looking forward to the better or to what really is important to us. But when we apply that to the spiritual, there is nothing greater, there is nothing larger than our hope, desire, and expectation of going to heaven. We may not regard our steadfastness, our perseverance, but if you identify that in Scripture and read it as one of the qualities of a Christian character, it's a blessing to be able to hang in there. A lot of people give up too easy, want to quit every day. But it's a blessing to be able to persevere. I say, I'm going to hang on here. I'm going to be faithful to the Lord. I'm going to serve no matter what. And the ability to have the inward self-discipline and strength to do that is truly a blessing. I'm going to name one more. It may be a surprise, but don't let it surprise you. Let it serve as the basis of an exhortation that we will sound today in anticipation of this new year. That the Lord's church is a blessing. And it's one that we need to regard as a blessing. And let me tell you, this congregation is a local congregation of that church. And this congregation should be regarded by each and every one of us as a blessing. Not as something that we don't feel right about or something that we may have bad feelings about, but something that is truly a blessing. We are a blessing. We are a blessing to be here. And every once in a while, and I've taken note of this, and perhaps you have noticed too, that oftentimes in our prayers led by good brethren, we thank God for this church. Why do we thank God for this church? Because it's important to us. It's a blessing to be able to come together upon the first day of the week in an assembly that we can do what the New Testament teaches us to do and follow the pattern of worship, follow the pattern of work, and every act of worship that is taught in the New Testament and have opportunity to do that is truly a blessing. It's not something that should be felt badly about or regretted or in any way bad-mouthed. This church is a blessing, and each of us needs to learn to have it as a high regard and count it very highly as one of our blessings. We've had a little bit of a count them one by one. If you take time to do this at home and you have much more time sitting around with that early morning cup of coffee like I do, that's one of the most important times of day for me, and it starts pretty early. You can think of things more numerous in your personal life as you take account. These truly are blessings. I need to count them. I need to take account of them, and I need to thank God for them. Well, we continue with the song. When upon life's billows, you remember just singing these songs, these words repeat in my ear from time to time. There's a word for that. I'll not get into that right now, but it probably does the same for you. You hear something that just keeps repeating. It's called an earworm. But when upon life's billows you are tempest-tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Now, in that section of the song, this is the beginning of the first verse and the second verse brought together for this chart. We have some when statements, and they are true of every one of us, aren't they? Doesn't your life sometimes seem like it's being tossed on the rolling waves as a fisherman's float, tossed to and fro? When upon life's billows you are tempest-tossed. Yeah, it happens. It's not a matter of if, like we hear so many times, it's a matter of when. And when you are discouraged, we all get discouraged. Sometimes discouragement is such an intense level that it's debilitating. That's the nature of discouragement. And sometimes it gets this bad, as expressed in the words of this song. We can think, everything's lost. Well, there's nothing left. There's no use even trying. Then there are two questions. Are you ever burdened? Sure, yes. Does your cross seem heavy? There are days it seems more than you can carry. Yes. But why are we saying these things? What is the answer to all of that? The answer is found in the chorus. Count your many blessings. Name them one by one. What is the point? By counting your blessings, it is God's wisdom and God's design for you to do that, to offset your life being tossed around in the billows and tempest-tossed. Counting your blessings are intended to overcome discouragement, or even prevent, or even lighten the load of care. And so the point is, by counting our blessings, God intends for that to offset the hardships of life. And we all have experienced that, right? You can relate to that. I can relate to that. Here's a bunch of this trouble. But okay, let's leave those there. They're real. They have happened. I deal with them. But let's come over here and start enumerating the good things. The way that God has blessed us, the many good things in our life, the good people in our life, the good things that happen every day. And his intent is, by looking and taking account of these things, it will offset and make not seem quite so bad these things, and give them time to cycle out. Give them time to be overcome, because truly God will help us. Count your many blessings. Every doubt will fly. You will be singing as the day goes by. There's a couple of thoughts in that song that really result in doing something that's important to all of us. But when it says, when we count our blessings, every doubt will fly. Have you ever thought about that? We all have uncertainties, doubts, and they crop up from time to time. Some serious, some not so serious. But this song is making the statement, the affirmation, that every doubt will fly away. What will cause every doubt to fly away? Counting your blessings. How does that work? How does that happen? Well, it seems to me, at least the way it works in my mind, is when we take stock of blessings, then we are reaffirmed, reassured that there's no reason for us to doubt anything. There's no reason for us to ever question God about anything. He has promised. He has kept his promises in the past. And by me seeing and focusing on these things in my mind and heart, then our doubts are dispelled. And the last line in this statement, you will be singing as the day goes by. In other words, doubts can be depressing. Doubts can be saddening, can be squelching a wonderful, happy spirit, and they do. And when we dispel doubt, we will have a more joyful disposition. All that is to say, that's God's way of blessing us by counting our blessings. In Psalm 100, I find in the first 3 verses some thoughts that relate to this that are very encouraging. Shout joyfully to the Lord. And when you see the word Lord expressed in all capitals in your translation, that's the word Jehovah. And so that's a recognition of Yahweh or Jehovah, the God, the only God of heaven. Shout joyfully to him, to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful singing. Know that the Lord himself is God. It is he who has made us and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. This clearly is a call to shout joyfully, sing joyfully, express joy to the Lord, and come before him with joyful singing. I want to underline that last part. To me, that's a striking statement. That's affirming something about us. Even in the book of Psalms, we are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Isn't that a vivid analogy of our relationship to the God of heaven? We are his sheep. Where are we grazing? Where are we getting everything that we need and are dependent on for life? His pasture, everything that he has provided. And so this psalm is one that expresses that. In Psalm 95, we have some similar thinking. 2 verses. O come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully to him with psalms. Perhaps it occurs to you, as some might object to that, but that was for people of the Old Testament. Do you realize how that applies to New Testament church singing? Ephesians 5:19, all of us, that we're to sing and make melody in our hearts to the Lord, singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. One of the kinds of songs that we are to sing in this assembly is psalms. We're to sing some of the psalms. And there are several, many of them actually in our book that we do sing, don't we? From time to time you may notice that this is actually one of the psalms. And this psalm is instructing us to do that. We are his people, and we are to sing joyfully to him with these psalms. We're to take the inspired poetry of the Old Testament and sing it unto the God of heaven with joy and with thanksgiving today. And that's all a part of acknowledging. Well, one more expression from this song, and this is the 3rd verse. In singing that, we sang so. Sometimes we say so. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged. God is over all. Count your many blessings Angels will attend, help and comfort give you to your journey's end. That comes to the end of the third verse of the song. Then the chorus, of course, is repeated. But as we look at that, especially that last line, the statement is made to reassure us that counting our blessings help and comfort us to our journey's end. So what that suggests to us is counting our blessings has a role throughout our lifetime. There's no part of our life, because if God intends for our blessings and counting them to benefit us to our journey's end, then certainly they have a role to play. I'd like to single out some of these with this chart and this diagram. What is that lifelong role as far as we sing it, as far as we teach and admonish one another about it in this song? Well, it's for conflicts in our life. We all have them. Some are little, some are big, but for every one of them, do not be discouraged, because the role of counting your blessings is to give you encouragement. And it's to recognize that God is supreme. God is our creator, and God is the ruler of all. God is over all. Paul affirmed that in Ephesians chapter 4 for New Testament Christianity, and we know that to be true. But it recognizes God's supremacy. Sometimes we worry about what's going to happen. We worry about current events. We worry about what's going to happen to our country, what's going to be here for our kids, for our grandkids, and rightly so. But all of that comes into perspective when we remember that God is in control. There's nothing that happens that God doesn't allow or control. God is in control of the nations. God is in control of your life if you let him. And so God is over all, and counting our blessings simply recognizes his supremacy over us. And then finally, it provides comfort to the very last breath that you draw. And that time will come. And when it does, if we have been such an individual that has developed such a character as this suggests, to be like Christ and to count our blessings as God wants us to do, then that will provide the comfort and encouragement down to the very end that will usher you across that great gulf into the next life. A word that's going to come right there to be individualized, singleized, and so is time. Our suggestion with this is that, well, let me put this there. All of us should consider time as a blessing. We get so used to watching the time, we get sensitive about time, about a lot of things, and we could go down a list of those things. But time is a blessing. The reason that you're alive now, that you will be alive in the next moment, that you'll be alive at the end of this day, the reason that we have 2023, time is a blessing from God. And we should never neglect counting it as a blessing. The Apostle Paul placed emphasis upon this in Ephesians chapter 5 when he taught us that we are to act as wise. Come on, let's act with a little bit of wisdom, not as the unwise, redeeming the time. You remember that expression that he wrote to the Ephesians? Using your time wisely, counting it as a blessing that God has given you to use. But for those who are not Christians, it's a blessing, because your life's not over yet. The world has not ended yet. It's an opportunity for you to become a Christian before it's too late. The next few minutes, the next day, the next week, and on is a blessing for those who are not Christians, as long as God continues time, as long as God allows your life to continue, time is a blessing because it gives you the opportunity to save your soul before it's too late. For sinning Christians, your soul is in jeopardy. There's no sin that shall enter heaven. There's no unforgiven sin that God will overlook. All sin must be forgiven, even to the lives of his children. Sin must be forgiven. And he has a plan for that. And we teach that. But for sinning Christians, time is a gift, a blessing for seeking forgiveness. Counting your blessings in 2023, starting today, right now. There may be someone present in this assembly today that is not yet a Christian, that would desire to be obedient to the gospel, or as an erring Christian that would like to make correction and become a forgiven, faithful Christian again. Or someone at home would like to discuss and study these things further. If there's any here present, let us know while together we stand and sing this song.